Welcome to our study called The Family of Shem. Today we're looking at Genesis 11:10 through 32. And we've been looking at this throughout this study here. And today we're starting with the introduction to this study, and we're going to talk a little bit about really the end of Noah's story here. Really come to the end of this era of Noah. And we witnessed the growing sinfulness of man, God's response in the worldwide flood. We saw how God chose to save Noah and his family and some representative pairs of all the animals that were on the ark. God would have been justified in condemning all the earth and all of mankind to a watery grave, but instead God made promises to Noah that he would not die. God made other promises as well. He promised future generations of people coming from his family. God promised that the seasons would continue and that he would never again destroy the earth with a flood. Noah did all that God commanded and worshiped God, but he was a man like his father Adam and inherited his sinful nature. Noah sinned, which opened the door for Ham to sin. Ham's sin would impact the generations that would come after him, specifically his son Canaan. And the words of Noah were a combination of curse and prophecy of God as he spoke against Ham and talked about Canaan and talked about Seth, not Seth, but Shem and Japheth. And there's a combination of curse and prophecy. Those things would come true. And so we started working our way through some transitional passages. We worked our way through the Table of Nations, and we saw where all the nations came from. Then we witnessed what happened when the people tried to rebel against God and make a name for themselves at the Tower of Babel. We saw what happened there. We saw the confusion of languages. People began to spread out across the earth. And that really brings us to our passage today, where we find one last transition from the post-flood world to the time of the patriarchs. This is the last really transitional section here. In verses 10 through 32, we find two more books in the book of Genesis. We have the book of Shem, which is another genealogy. And then we have the beginning of the book of Terah. And so the tendency is to really skip from the story of the Tower of Babel, which is a cool story, I understand, and then jump right into chapter 12, where it talks about the call of Abram. So this little genealogy here kind of gets, skipped. It kind of gets pushed to the side. Yet there's some important information in here that God wants us to know. The author, Moses, put this in this place for a reason, not just by accident. There's a reason for this. So I want to remind you again, the occasion of the writing of Genesis. Remember, sometime during the wilderness wandering of the Israelites, God caused Moses to write this book. The information it contains would be vital for the newly forming nation. When we in the U.S. think about legislation and the way our government works, we often go back to the works outside of the Constitution, right, to help us understand where we came from, where we ought to go. Works like the Declaration of Independence. That's not the Constitution, but it helps influence how we view the Constitution. There's the Federalist Papers. We use those. We even go back to the Magna Carta to help us understand where our Constitution has taken us to and where we're going. Genesis is like one of those documents for the nation of Israel, and by extension, us as Christians. It may not always be relevant to every specific situation, but the truth it contains is always important and is always something we need to know. So let's look at this section and see what God has for us and what we need to know about the origins of the man named Abram.